Greetings. Welcome to the Hidden Truth concerning the Accomack Indians of Virginia. I'm your guardian of the Accomacs. Today I'd like to continue to discuss the plight of the Accomack Indians and how exactly we became slaves and changed from our indigenous Indian selves to Negroes. Well, it started from the very beginning. Because remember, what I guess people do not speak of are all the wars, the Indian-Anglo wars. I did speak of how much we helped, but despite the help, there were wars. And the first impact was that first horrible war, the war that we actually were traitors for the assistance to the Jamestown settlement. That war was in 1622. But even before that, let's back it up a bit. The actual first war was in 1610. And in 1610, we continued to trade with the Anglos and help them and, try to support them. And actually we still lost our land and still lost our freedom and still went from being free landowners to tenants and slaves. We went from the multi-textured hair and dark brown to reddish brown skin, or medium brown to dark reddish brown skin that we really loved, to a Negro and a slave who was banished from our own home. And then, conversely, the Anglo-dominant quadroons and octoroons, people of mixed heritage, became lawfully accepted as what was a true Indian. Sadly, this happened right before our very eyes, and it became unlawful to call ourselves Indian. We would be murdered. We would be jailed for identifying Indian, even though that's what we really were. So the transition was harsh and it was forced. It wasn't just that we simply forgot, but we were a people who were forced to forget. Let's go with that first war. The first actual war that was big was in 1610 to 1614. It was deemed a massacre of our people. We suffered tremendously for that. And as a result, you see a bump, if you look at the numbers, in the number of Negroes after 1610. Miraculously, all of a sudden, from 1610 to 1627, Accomack becomes a plantation. Ooh, how did that happen? How did you have so many workers that you have a fully functioning, profitable plantation when you didn't even get slaves sent in from other places until 1619? Doesn't really match up. And you only got 20 slaves voted in on the record to Virginia. So all this 20, 30, 40 years, you have an exponential growth of Negroes and a disappearance of Indians and two major wars. Two major wars. The second major war was that one in 1622 that lasted to 1632. Now, many Indians from the Eastern Shore and the neighboring across the Bay, Virginia, were enslaved as a result of those wars. Okay, that's why they had a lot of people to work the good Accomack plantation. In addition, another way, a result of that war there were widows and there were orphans. And the widows had no one to hunt. Now, you could farm as a widow, so you could bond yourself into servitude because you were a good farmer, but you couldn't hunt. You see, so if you can't hunt, then that's half your sustenance. That's your money, because the hunters made the money. They went out, they hunted, they could trade furs, they could trade whatever they hunted, the meat. They could provide meat, they could provide fur to keep you warm in the winters. Without your men, you didn't have that. So all you had was your skill as housekeeper, a plantation servant, a farmer. So many of these women had to bond themselves out. They had to say, take me, I'll work for food, literally. In addition to that, the children, there were laws on the books in Virginia, and as there are in various states, that bonded your children into servitude. If you look at Paul Henig's list of free people of color, or free African Americans as he calls it now, which he shouldn't have changed it because it was free people of color. The lists were deemed that and called that, and that's what we were, free people of color. And the free people of color was the color Indian, okay? It shows so many times that this family bonded out their 2 sons, that family bonded out their daughter, this family bonded out their 4 sons to servitude. These people were bonded until they were 30 years old. 12 years or 30 years old was supposed to be the indenture. Of course, with greed and with profit, how do you just let go of your good free worker after they turn 30? Man, they're just getting their stride on. So Virginia decided they needed to change those good laws. And so that's what happened. There were laws repelling the freedom of these people. Let's see. They're not born in a Christian world. There comes the Christianity to try to put the hammer in things, to make it seem kosher. Not kosher, sorry, Christian. They would say, and they did say, well, if they are not born of a Christian nation, not born of parentage. It's called the Parentage Act, actually, Christian parentage. If they didn't have Christian parentage and those Christians were not from a Christian nation, they must be slaves for life. Oops, you're not free at 30. Sorry, Sam, you're not free. You're a slave for life. What? Okay. Can you understand the gravity of that? Imagine you just waiting for that day you can be free and this happens to you. Okay? The reason this happened was because there was greed and they needed the workers to continue. So in 1682, the Christian Parentage, or the Virginia Slave Act, used racism as a political device. Let me repeat that. Racism was used as a political device. Does that sound familiar? Racism as a political device? My words, guess what? It's happening today. It's happened throughout history. It was the way to keep the balance of power where they wanted to be in this country, in this nation. It is a device that wasn't just used here. It was used in Australia. It was used in New Zealand. It was used all over the place. But nowhere more devastating than in the Americas, because there were so many of us. So many of us that even according to Columbus, he took slave samples like a buffet. He sent slaves out into the European countries and sent samples out so everybody could see what good workers and what mild-tempered, good-natured people we were and how we could be easily dominated for profit. Every trader at that time did so. We were sent all across the world. Not African slaves so much, but us, because of our good nature and our good skills. So, as they needed more help and other skill sets, the Africans were brought in for their specific skills. It's all about profit. And although it was said we were like mules and like chattel, we had skills, and that's why they imported us. It wasn't just because you wanted a beast of burden. You wanted somebody who knew how to work the cane fields. We didn't have sugar cane. We had natural sugars from saps of trees and plants. We didn't use sugar. Hence why we have such a problem with diabetes today. Cane is not our friend. It's not indigenous to our nation. So they imported cane. That was they brought it over like on a ship, like the first ones that came here. They're like, let me see if this will work here, boop, plop, So cane was a major thing that actually kind of spurred an influx of a small amount of African slaves so that they could work the cane fields. They were familiar with it. Unlike us, we were here for the tobacco. When we're not here for the tobacco, they learned about tobacco from us. They liked it, and then they brought that, just like they brought us overseas, and they were like, yeah, this is good. The Negroes are good and the tobacco are good. I'll take more of all, So basically, that's what happened. They wanted more of us over there, and they wanted more of our good tobacco, and hence the slave trade actually, as some people are saying, happened in reverse, but we were actually farmed out to a lot of the world, okay? And that's definitely recorded. So it really wasn't we also had, it wasn't just a race thing at first. Understand that the indentured servants, we worked side by side with white people who were, or I shouldn't say white people, Anglo people who were brought here because of owing money, bonds. Hey, I need that good food. Oh, well, you're broke. Well, you owe me money. Well, here, you go to the Americas. You can't pay me, go to the Americas. Same with us. We didn't have food. We had to work to make up for the money that we got from them to survive. And so it was a working class thing. We worked together. We lived the same. We babysat each other's children. We, shared in each other's woes. And it resulted in what was an Afro-Anglo indentured servant war. That nobody talks about. When the blacks and Anglos got together and said, look, we're tired of all these masters and plantation and landowners pushing us around and using us for free and not setting us free when we're supposed to be freed, when our time is up. And so in 1663, there was a war against the people in power. The working people got together and said, enough is enough. Oh, was that a scary thing? Yes, indeed, that was scary. That was scary. When the working class people got together and decided to band together against the people in power, oh baby, you had to divide them up even tighter, because the reality was the people that were rich, the people that were in the Virginia Company, the people that came there that were profiteers, they didn't want to give up anything to the Anglo poor people that came here either. With the profits tanking, desperate times called for desperate measures. And the desperate measure that was taken was that 1682 Parentage Act. And the 1682 Parentage Act was a direct, let me tell you, everything that happened in this country that was big and major was a direct result of war. That's what I'm trying to get through to you. The 1663 war set off the Parentage Act, or the Virginia Slave Act. It was to divide a line between black and white forever. Okay, forever and ever. Because that way, if you were Christian and white, even if you were broke and an indentured servant, you got to be free and get land. However, if you're on this side of the line and you are Negro looking in appearance or brown, you get nada, and you have to stay a slave forever. Okay. That was all out of the need to maintain slavery and the real need to maintain profits. So here you have it. Now I'm not your friend anymore. Now I'm not your... What? You get to be free? You get to be free, Jonathan? Well, I have to stay here? So the law talked about color, and it really whittled it down. It talked about sorting the slaves by color, be they Jew, be they tithable Negro, be they mulatto or Indian slave. The law says, that you can see as on my document, that it clearly lined it up. They didn't want any stone unturned, anybody. It didn't care whether you were a slave, Jew, Negro, mulatto, Indian slave, whatever it was, they covered it. And they said, you fall under this whole Christian parentage law, and that's what's happening. So when I went to school, they didn't talk about Indians being slaves, and I didn't know about that. But now the Smithsonian readily admits online in articles that the colonial America depended on the enslavement of indigenous people. Now, let's go with this colonial America thing. The problem I have with saying it's a colonial America is how Guess what? Let's talk about that next time. Next time, let's get together and let's talk about exactly how the colonies planted themselves on top of us, literally, and how that impacted it not really being a colonial America. It really was like Plymouth Rock literally landing on us. They literally plopped the colonial people literally plopped themselves right in the middle of what was our world. And we'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about a little bit about Nat Turner next time on my next video. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. Tell a friend. And if there's anything I got wrong or you have questions about, please leave it in the comments and I'll try to address it next time. Thanks.